What's up, everybody? Welcome to our first episode of Mouse in the House. On today's episode, Geoff and I are going to introduce ourselves and a little bit about the podcast. Then we're going to talk about the new NBA layout from a different perspective.
Welcome to the first episode of Mouse in the House. This podcast will be about life lessons and personal insights learned through the eyes of NBA fans while relating to our own experiences as players and coaches. My name's Geoff. I've been a fan of the game ever since I was a kid. Quarantine gave me a lot of time to create something that is relevant to my passion. So that brings me here today with my co-host Max.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? My name is Max, and I also grew up playing and watching the game, which really fueled my desire to learn more about it each and every day. Geoff called me up one day of the idea of starting a podcast, and now here we are.
Yeah, that's enough about us. No one really gives us it. Let's just get to the content.
Yeah, man, let's get into it. So by now, I think we're pretty familiar with the whole NBA restart format, rules, regulations, and whatnot. It'll definitely be unlike something we've never seen before in the NBA world. Players will have to adjust to new lifestyles off the court, different game on the court. How do you think the players will react and adapt to the new NBA layout / bubble lifestyle?
Yeah, I think from a mental and an emotional standpoint, I think it's going to be a big challenge. I mean, to start with the obvious, it'll be tough not being able to see your family. Also, having an 8-foot Q-tip shoved up your nose every night to test for COVID, I think is going to be a big adjustment mentally. That's not going to be fun at all. I think the food that is being served for players will also be an adjustment because, when you're getting paid multi-million dollars and you're an NBA player, chances are you have your own personal chef and you're getting 3 meals a day that are 5-star worthy. And you go to that and you get those animal crackers with apple juice with the main course being Lunchables. It's a big difference.
Yeah, no, definitely. Just dealing with the thought that you could wake up the next morning with the results of having a positive COVID test is pretty scary. But from a food standpoint, I think that's a little bit far-fetched with Lunchables.
That may be true, but if my body is used to having top-tier healthy foods in my system, it may take some time for my body to adjust to the new nutrients.
Look, I totally agree with you, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but the food isn't that terrible. All right, yeah, it may not look appealing, but you're still getting that protein intake that's required as an NBA player. I mean, all these posts that the NBA guys are throwing up on the gram, it really just shows you how spoon-fed that they've been getting into the league. And, man, where's the gratitude? You got to be grateful for everything you got, and especially the opportunity to hoop at the end of the day. But that's just coming from myself and from a personal perspective.
I mean, there just has to be a happy medium. I just don't see Joel Embiid pounding out triple-doubles consuming apple juice and animal crackers. Aside from the food, the barbershop was a cool addition. It looks like it came straight out of 2K.
Yeah, no, for real. Yeah, some of these guys really do need that cut, though.
I got a question for you. So if you get a haircut an hour before your game and your opponent has the same schedule for his haircut, are you talking to your opponent in the barbershop or engaging in any sort of barbershop talk?
Am I matching up with him? Like he's guarding me and I'm guarding him? That's the matchup? That's the opponent?
Could be.
Well, if that's the case, I'm definitely not talking to him, but I will engage in some barbershop talk and throw some subtle hints of shit talking while he's sitting right there. It'll definitely fuel that matchup for the night.
Yeah, I hear you. I think it's kind of crazy that you're only going to be surrounded by the people you're competing against, aside from your teammates.
Yeah, no, it kind of reminds me of those big AU tournaments you go away for, or better yet, a hoop group camp, but obviously for a longer period of time. But from a fan's point of view, I think it's a pretty cool experience besides the fear of COVID spreading.
I think the camaraderie aspect of it all will be interesting to see from the outside looking in. I think the NBA players who decided to opt out are going to kind of miss out to some degree. I think this NBA restart is going to be a historic moment. And I think they're going to miss out on some cool memories with their teammates and fellow peers around the league. What are your thoughts about the players who opted out from the NBA restart?
Well, you really got to look at the reasoning for the sitting out, right? You got guys with families, some with expected children in the near future, and I think with these family emergencies, it's a pretty valid excuse. But you're protecting the ones you love, and obviously that comes first above all. And then you got some players sitting out due to injury, and it's stuff like that that you really can't control. But it's a really good point you made. Despite the virus, this is really something an NBA player can come back to 20 years from now and say, you know what? Yeah, no, I did participate in that 2020 restart, and it was one for the ages.
I mean, everyone's reason for opting out is different. Whether it's like Bradley Beal's injury, or Davis Bertans' contract risk, or Trevor Ariza and Avery Bradley's family issues. I think if you're like Davis Bertans, you should at least consider playing in the bubble.
Yeah, especially if you're competing for that eighth spot in the East. That's really the only reason you got invited to the bubble, right? So, I mean, with these next few regular season games and heading into the postseason, which teams do you think will benefit and which teams do you think will worsen given the new format and all the opting out?
Obviously, any team losing players because they decided to opt out, it's going to affect them negatively because of team chemistry and if they have minutes, just the overall performance. But I think in terms of the NBA layout, I think the younger teams will benefit more than the teams that are predominantly vets. Because the younger teams now don't have to go through the experience aspect of the atmosphere of the playoffs. The experience becomes a long way for the playoffs due to the intensity and the atmosphere of them. So without that, it's going to be easier for them to transition to it because it's also just going to feel like a regular game. Whereas for these veteran teams, they've gotten used to that atmosphere for so long, they almost kind of are going to need that extra push for home court advantages and, those adrenaline rushes you get from the atmosphere of the playoffs. So I think it's going to be harder for them to maintain motivation throughout the playoffs.
Yeah, I can't even grasp what really a game 7 would look like in the playoffs without fans in attendance. But I guess these playoffs are really going to show us what that looks like exactly. Like, I mean, imagine a Kawhi game winner like the one from last year. The ball kissed every part of the rim and dropped. Or Dame Lillard over Paul George and he starts waving back at him. The crowd's super important. It brings out things like that. It brings out body language of the players. Pre-game rituals they just really hit different in those scenarios. And just the overall mentality towards the matchup you're going against and the layup lines. I think with these younger guys, they're definitely missing out on the intensity of the fans that bring to each stadium. But now with nobody in attendance, I think it's really just a neutral game for every team.
I know the NBA is considering using the 2K crowds for all the games, but I really don't think that's going to make any difference whatsoever. You brought up an interesting concept about miking up the players and coaches during the games. Do you think that would increase ratings on television?
Well, I mean, it really depends who's watching the game, right? Because you got people of all ages tuning into the games. So, I mean, miking up the players would be a pretty unique idea. We'd really be able to get a grasp and a perspective of what players are saying during the games. And pretty much we're getting NBA authentic trash talk. And, I mean, at the same time, you really have to think about it from a different perspective. Like, you got little kids, 7-year-olds, watching a basketball game. And then you got Patrick Beverley out here dropping F-bombs left and right.
Yeah, or to see if Kawhi Leonard speaks. I love to hear what these players are saying when they bitch at the referees. Like when LeBron skipped and charged at that referee when it was his first ejection. I'd love to see what he was saying. I feel like Patrick Beverley would just be snarling like a dog. I think it still would be funny if they even just censored out all the cuss words. Because, I don't know, hearing censors in a basketball game, I just think would be really funny.
Yeah, well, pretty much the whole 48 minutes of basketball would be censored. But yeah, no, I think we can agree that without the fans, it's really going to be pretty empty in each stadium. Well, really just one stadium, but different home courts. But I mean, as fans, we really just want to hear the players mic'd up and really what the coaches are speaking in every single timeout. I think that'll be pretty fun for the game. And yeah, I don't think those 2K sounds are really going to do anything for the players, like you said.
Do you think it'll be harder for fans to watch on television when all the games will be silent?
I don't think it'll necessarily be harder, but the game actually might get boring at times. You know, I was watching the TBT a few weeks ago, and that was really our first visualization of what basketball is going to look like on TV without fans. But I mean, obviously the game wasn't the same, but the quality of play was still top tier at its finest, because I think guys really knew their purpose and what they were playing for, because specifically in the TBT tournament, you got guys playing for the $1 million grand prize, and they all split their share at the end. So I mean, it was good to see that that element was still in check. And I mean, listen, if you're talking about any sporting event, it's always a killer watching it in silence with no fans.
I think the fans will be satisfied either way. As for the players, I think the key factor to winning in the new layout is how much inspiration the teams have for the game. Inspiration is an everlasting fire burning that one can go to at any time to get the job done. Inspiration has passion, emotion, adrenaline, and most importantly, purpose, while motivation only gives you temporary emotions and adrenaline boosts. Which is why the teams that are inspired the most by the game will have the best chance of winning in this layout. Fans can only give teams temporary motivation or boosts of adrenaline. Without the fans, the only thing you have to rely on is inspiration.
Yeah, man, well said, totally. But let's just stay on this mental and emotional aspect of getting comfortable with the game. And I just wanted to ask, what sort of value, if any, what sort of value does this championship hold this season, this playoffs, compared to other years?
Honestly, I don't think the value of a championship necessarily has to do with the template of it rather than the story of it. You know, like everybody loves a good story, which in my opinion, why the 2016 finals was like the best I've seen. You know what I mean? Because the 73-9 Warriors, and the 3-1 lead with LeBron, and
It ain't a thing without a ring, right?
yeah, yeah, and like Kobe retiring and everything. There was so much storytelling in that season, even with KG and Tim Duncan retiring. Like it was such a good year for the NBA. And then you compare it to the Raptors and the Warriors, and like everybody was just getting hurt, and LeBron wasn't there, so ratings just dropped. So like even with the players, the storytelling, it's more about that storytelling, you know? Like I think it has the potential to be a really good high valued playoffs and finals, but it depends on who makes it. So if you have the Clippers versus the Lakers, that's going to be kind of sick. But I don't know, if you get like the Kings and somebody else that don't necessarily have that storyline to it yet. You know what I mean? Because you see, you know, with the Lakers and Clippers, this has been hyped up for the whole year. So there's that feeling, that emotion towards that rivalry. Or another example is, I mean, maybe biased because I'm a Heat fan, but the Heat were a shock this year, and if they make it up there, that'd be a good story, personally.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, yeah, just like you said, we've been hyping up Lakers versus Clippers for pretty much the entire year. And to add 4 months onto that wait, you know, it's going to be something special for sure. But yeah, like you said, the Lakers, obviously LeBron's been missing the playoffs for the last few years because, you know, of his circumstances and everything. But Clippers, you know, they got Kawhi Leonard, they got Paul George, they got all these guys. And yeah, man, it's just going to be really exciting to see both of them compete in the playoffs. And hopefully one of them can come out as champions.
Hopefully it really comes down to anybody who's trending.
Pretty much,
for the good storytelling. Like, people are going to want to see Giannis.
People have been hyping up the Bucks for the last 3 years.
True. Yeah. Like, I feel like in the East, it'll be a highly valued playoff/finals if it's either the Bucks, the Heat, because of how much of a shock they were, or the Sixers, because they have a big fan base. I would say Boston, but they're kind of... They don't have standout names. Like, I don't think...
Jason Tatum is on the rise, though.
He's on the rise, and he's very similar in terms of skill with Ben Simmons, like the tier level. But he's not trending like Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. They're more of a popular
and the thing
player
is
per se.
With Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, we've also been waiting a few years for them to even make their debut seasons. You know, they were both the number 1 picks in their respective drafts. So we have to remember that, and they were dealing with injuries coming into the NBA. So for them to win a ring, even on the same team together, that'd be something huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those 3, I think, would make the best story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because of the names and this and that. So, in terms of the comparison, it's pretty much comes down to the storyline. But I think the layout is like a little bit of a bonus. Right? Like, I don't think it'll be much of a difference if it's a team that doesn't have a good story behind it.
So we can jump into our last topic for the podcast, the NBA Anonymous Snitch Hotline. What are your thoughts about that?
I wouldn't be surprised if I saw NBA players like lie on the hotline and try and get other players from other teams quarantined for 2 weeks so they couldn't play in the playoffs.
So you're saying like a Patrick Beverley calling and lying about Giannis crossing the bubble line?
Yeah, or like LeBron.
Just so they don't have to play?
Yeah, like Patrick Beverley calling saying LeBron left the bubble to get some more hair products.
From the newly installed NBA Barbershop Bubble Edition?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I don't know. I definitely think players will do that. You know, anything to win.
Yeah, I mean, but here's what I'm pretty questionable about. How do they know if it's true? Right? They probably have to go back to the footage or something like security cam footage.
Yeah, and like, what if like there was one scenario where like they're right at the line, and like one player was just acting like a jackass, and he kind of just like put 1 foot over, one back.
Yeah. I mean, then he deserves it. He deserves to be quarantined and not playing. That's just, come on, just follow the rules, man.
What if they try and trick each other to go past it? Like, what if there's like an actual line that like the refs. Not the refs, the people that are the authority of these lines and boundaries, and like they try and get the players over it, and then they snitch on them.
So you're saying authorities are gonna make the players cross the boundaries?
I'm saying they're gonna try and get the authorities to see them past it and trick them. Players will do that to players and then have the authorities see it.
That's interesting.
So like, what if, I don't know, Patrick Beverley stole LeBron's hairline products and put it past the line, the boundaries of the bubble, and now like LeBron can't get it because it's on the line. But what if he stepped over it for like 5 seconds, but then the footage is there?
That is true. I think both players should then be penalized for their actions. I think they're both dicks.
Yeah, I don't know. I would do some shit like that.
I know you would.
Yeah.
You do that to me?
Yeah.
And you just keep it a secret, or?
Then I would tell you it was me. I don't give a shit.
You tell me straight to my face that you snitched on me?
Yes.
I respect that.
But, I don't know. I could definitely see players doing that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I believe that wraps up our intro episode.
Yes, sir.
Be sure to stay in touch with us on Instagram and Facebook. The Instagram is Mouse in the House Podcast, all lowercase. And if you just put Mouse in the House Podcast on Facebook, you'll find it. And I'll see y'all next episode.
Thanks, everybody.